My name is Chris, and today we're going to review the Fluance RT85. Welcome to the Vinyl Attack. Please note that while Fluance were kind enough to send me this table for review, this is not a sponsored video, and I can assure you that the opinions given hereafter are as accurate as I'm able to articulate. As I've gotten a little bit older, my view on time has seemingly become relevant to the memory with which it's associated. When people talk about the great music of the 90s, I don't seem to view it as a period that was, dare I say, almost 30 years ago, as I remember it so clearly and it seems so near. So when going over the history of Fluance, I initially viewed them as a bit of an upstart as they'd only been around since 1999. Then it hits me. This brash new upstart of a company looking to make its mark, initially in speaker design and home theater, is 22 years old. It's no wonder they've been able to garner a strong following of their products, as word of mouth has been one of, if not the biggest champions of their success for quite some time now. This impact was clearly felt in the vinyl community when they created their first offering of a turntable some 5 years ago, the RT80 and 81. The music lovers in this company wanted to create an affordable avenue for the newer collectors to get into the record collecting scene without breaking the bank and without sacrificing quality and settling for an inferior product. So when Market Fluance reached out to ask if I'd like to review their current flagship model, the RT85, I was quite happy to say yes. For one thing, it's always exciting for me to have someone reach out and ask me for my opinion on one of their products. For another, I quite like the Fluance models I've had the opportunity to use, those being the RT83 and of course the 85. Many of you have inquired about the 85 and my thoughts about it, several of whom were ready to click the purchase button, as Fluance employs a direct-to-consumer sales model, a model they prefer so they can help their customers find their individual needs without a middleman. You wanted to make sure that your money was going to a product that performed well and would last for years to come, so let's take a look at what you can expect. This table aims to appease as many people as possible using quality parts, construction, and features while keeping the price affordable as well, and I think it does a very good job. One of those features is its well-known cartridge, the Ortophone 2M Blue. But before we go over the sound quality of this table, let's take a moment to look at what else they built under the hood. The RT85 is a belt-driven model that includes speeds of 33 and 45, utilizing an acrylic platter for lower resonance and direct contact to your LPs for the best sonic connectivity. You'll have no worries of felt, cork, or rubber mats adding static to your records during play, and it's an attractive platter to boot. With a slightly frosted top and bottom, the 3-pound platter, whose weight helps stabilize speed and reduce vibrations, has a glossy edge which adds better adherence to the belt with which spins it to avoid slipping. I had no trouble with the surface abrasions or scratches using the platter, and I had no fear about playing the most expensive records on this table. I'd imagine the more clever among you could probably find a way to introduce LED lighting for a custom look, making it that much more your own. Concerning the belt, it's fairly trouble-free to put on and get running, and I'm happy to say that you'll also not need to adjust it to change the speeds of the table should you want to break out your favorite 7-inch 45s using the included adapter. While some of you may ask about Tommy Chong's favorite speed of 78, I offer you this. When is the last time you actually saw a 78 record for sale, let alone played one? Of course, there are those of you who have curated 78s in your collection, but with those being such a rare and specialty item these days, you probably already have the table you need to enjoy them. Setup of this table was easy and very straightforward with the informative and detailed instruction manual. You'll need to put on the platter, attach the belt, and learn to adjust the counterweight in the back along with the anti-skating feature directly next to it, but do not let this intimidate you. These are basic hand-eye mechanical requirements that I assure you are simple to do when you take the time and read the step-by-step guide. And if you're capable of operating a stove, you're capable of this. For those of us who like tinkering with turntables regularly, you'll find that this one was fun and quick to get going. An included feature that many of you have commented on liking is the auto stop. While this is a manual turntable for all intents and purposes, this feature, when engaged, will automatically stop the platter from spinning when the record ends to avoid unnecessary wear and tear on your stylus. It takes roughly 30 seconds for this to happen once the end of the groove is reached, but I'm sure the majority of you, much like me, have accidentally let our runout grooves go on a bit longer than we intended before lifting the tone arm. To use this feature, it's as simple as flipping a switch on the back, setting the desired speed with the dial, and then bringing the tone arm into position. The table will start from there, and all you need to do is lower the arm, and you're on your way to not having to worry about rushing back to your record should you be in the other room when it finishes. Of course, you don't need to use this option, and the motor, after an interesting hesitation when turned on, most likely because of the auto-stop mechanic, gets up to speed fairly quickly for a belt-drive turntable and runs quite steadily until you turn it off. Using my Ultimate Analog Test LP, I listened carefully for wow and flutter using its test tones, and I'm quite pleased with the result I heard. Now I could go into great detail about the ease of setup, the detachable head shell, its adjustable counterweight, and the anti-skate function along with the gorgeous smoke-colored dust cover, but I'd like to move into the 3 color options available and my favorite area, the sound of this table, which is probably why you're here. The RT85 comes in piano black and a natural walnut, both of which are high gloss finishes, but I'd have to say my favorite finish is the newer satin bamboo. The striking contrast between the bamboo plinth and the satin black hardware makes for a wonderful combination that I would expect to see on tables in a much higher price range. I've heard some say that the other finishes aren't quite as nice as they'd hoped, or perhaps that they look budget, but I can say with certainty that the bamboo more than meets my standards for a visually exciting piece that would look great in my own hi-fi setup and one I'd proudly display. At the time of this recording, their gloss white option is out of stock, however. But how does it sound? After all, a turntable can have all the features and looks you want, but if it doesn't sound appealing to you, it might as well be a doorstop. Enter the Ortophone 2M Blue. The 2M Blue is a moving magnet cartridge that has made its way to the top of the first upgrades list for the last several years. There are more threads on the internet about its sonic qualities than there are grains of sand on a beach, so I'll skip those thoughts for the moment. It sells for roughly $240 all on its own, and yet it comes standard on the $499 RT85. Trying to keep in mind what a fairly common and relatively affordable setup might be, I paired the RT85 up to the $129 Shitmanny Phono preamp, as you do need an external preamp for this table, and I gave it some power with a Sony STR DN1060, an affordable home theater amp that can be found for the used market right around $300 to $400. For speakers, I used a pair of first-gen ELAC Unify UB5 bookshelves that I purchased on sale for about $350 a few years back. Not wanting to sell for just one method of sonic testing, though, I decided to see what this table could do if it was running on something with a little more refinement. So I connected it to my EAT Eglo Petite, a Hagel H90, and ran those through a pair of Bowers & Wilkins 603 floor-standing speakers. I figured if this table could sound smooth and articulate here, it's definitely worth your consideration. For music, I stuck with 3 records that I know quite well from different genres to test a range of sound. The most recent remaster of Alice in Chains' seminal classic Facelift, the eclectic and very fun remix album The Cure Mixed Up, and the new Tone Poet release of Curtis Amy's Katanga, which hasn't spent much time off of my turntable since I brought it home. With these 3 albums, I was able to find an excellent field of sound from deep, punchy and throbbing bass to loud, crunchy and powerful guitar, while not forgetting about the subtleties of acoustic instruments and the complexities of horns and the dynamics found amongst them all. With both systems, I found that the 85 with the 2M Blue was a lively pairing that brought out particularly clear focus to the upper mid-range and the highs. While bass depth and clarity was much improved on the higher-end system, I find myself impressed with the punch and rumble it was able to achieve on the more affordable one as well. Pulsating bass beats felt solid and visceral, and notes were reached without a subwoofer that made me take notice more than once. While busier sections of the Cure album had the combo struggling a bit with focus on individual instruments, especially when bass was the prevalent note, keep in mind that I am indeed scrutinizing the performance for weak areas so you get the full picture. For almost all of the Mixed Up album, this table brought out the electronic instruments in a well-represented package that blended effortlessly with the voice of Robert Smith, whether it was swimming in studio effects at the time or running more dry on top for a contrast to the dance beats. There was excellent stereo separation even if the imaging was a tad narrow compared to what I'm used to, but the crunch of Jerry Cantrell's outstanding guitar tone came through with crisp bite, and I never once wished that it could do more than it did. Different from the Cure album, this table didn't seem to struggle as much with instrument separation and definition with this pressing of Facelift. Mike Starr's bass guitar, while hitting the necessary low notes to drive the album forward, also had a dirty, almost growling clarity that assured you that this was no finger bass virtuoso playing slap and tap. It was thick, solid lows with a piano top-end style of picked bass that made the album have an attitude in an era where attitude was finally making a comeback, after years of the glam rock scene watering down rock music with formulaic regularity. While I'd have liked to have heard more clarity and sparkle in the ride cymbal and hi-hats, in this mix I might be asking just a little too much from the 85. Even my clear audio concept with the HANA ML almost lacks a little bit of the spotlight I'd enjoy here, so I'd chalk that up much to the mix of the album and less to the hardware in which it's being played. Bear in mind this album is almost 31 years old, remastered or not. That being said, the space between toms on the drum set were particularly evident, and the kick drum was enough to make you feel it in your chest if you pushed the volume enough. I enjoyed being able to sit and close my eyes and picture Sean Kinney behind his kit and knowing, without looking, where he was playing at the time. The 2 on Blue really seems to like jazz music. The latest Kevin Gray remaster of the Curtis Amy and Dupree Bolton classic Katanga, just recently released by Blue Note Records, really left off the turntable and showed me excitement and energy. The acoustic bass was deep and clear, the cymbals were bright, and the toms had a very classic tang to the tone that helped set the mood in imagining which era it was created. I enjoyed the presence of the piano and the smooth feel of the guitar, but the horns, however, were the highlight of this album for me. Generally speaking, that's the case for most horn-led jazz albums, but the RT-85 and the 2 on Blue combination here took great care in showing what a clean horn should sound like. With some of the saxophone passages, I could hear the resonance of the notes emanating from the bell and the breath of Curtis through the reed when the music was more quiet and nuanced. So what are my thoughts then? Well, let's start with the positives. This table, while priced at what many would consider to be the entry point to the audiophile minimum, is built very well. It has almost all the features you could want for the money, it's attractive, and most importantly, it gives you a gateway to quality sound. While it's evident that the RT-85 sounded better on the more expensive system, that's also a plus for those on a budget. When thinking forward about upgrading your hi-fi system, you can rely on this table to hold its own for quite some time before you have to start thinking about upgrading the cartridge or a replacement in general. This can free up money to expand on the other areas in your stereo that might be lacking, leaving you to come back much later and know that you're getting analog quality sound from your turntable. So then, what is it lacking? As it happens, not much. It took me a few days to adjust to having a belt wrapped on the outside of the platter, as I occasionally pulled it off when removing a record, but my turntable has no belt on the outside, so I simply wasn't used to this. The 85 made me aware of how much of the platter I was touching when changing records. Of course, as time went on, this was no longer an issue, and it became a nice training tool to help me touch less of my own table moving forward. You may need to adjust the 3 feet a few fair times, as the suspension in them that helps reduce vibration also has sort of a sinking feel when first placed down. Again though, this isn't a negative quality, it just takes some patience to account for that action to make sure you're adjusting enough before you try again. The cartridge is a different conversation. The 2 on Blue has many, many fans and is widely regarded as the gateway to better tone when first upgrading your turntable. While the pairing of the cartridge to the table is indeed a good fit, for those of you who are a bit more sensitive to pronounced upper mid-range and high-end frequencies like I am, you may consider something else. This, of course, is a personal preference and not a knock on the table or the cartridge, but different people have different preferences in sound, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention to you the general tonal characteristics of the 2 on Blue. And yes, I did my homework, and according to the people who work there, it is indeed pronounced ordophone. Do with that what you will. The one thing I'd like to see changed on this current model, however, is the tone arm lift lever and a tweak to the tone arm lift itself. When the tone arm is lowered, I'm extremely pleased with the soft touchdown of the stylus on the record. When it's lifted, though, it shoots up a bit abruptly, and I just find it a tad disconcerting. Of course, this doesn't hurt anything as it's on its way up, I just don't care for the feel, and it gives me a bit of a start from time to time. This leads me to the tone arm lift lever. It's a plasticky feeling thing, which I could live with a little easier if it weren't so short and located so close to the tone arm lock. Several times through the weeks with this table, I went to go use the lever and bump the lock shut instead. Taking this lever and simply adding a little length would do wonders for the feel and ergonomics. It's a small nitpick with a simple fix, but I try to be thorough if nothing else. Lastly, I'd say that more than anything, I'd love to see an adjustable VTA. Now, I realize you can't get everything with a $500 table, and you do get so much for your money here. But perhaps adding another step-up model around the $650 to $700 mark with adjustable vertical tracking and maybe a couple more metal parts could take this table and make it that much more viable for budding audiophiles who'd like to move into trying out other cartridges and in the higher market in general. While much discussion of this table from other sources to my very own review here focus on the for the money adage, I think perhaps this can be a bit of a disservice. Yes, this table is good value for the money and it does deserve your consideration, but I'd also say that it stands on its own 2 feet, or 3 feet as the case may be, without needing to focus on the value because too often we associate value with low price or lesser quality. This turntable has excellent value, as it would just so happen it also has an affordable price. So what about you? Are you considering the RT85 from Fluance? I know many of you out there already have one, and I'd certainly like to hear from both camps on this in the comments section below. I hope this review was helpful, if not entertaining, and I look forward to next time.